see. Can you hear me at the back of the room? Do I need a mic? It's all good? Great. I might try it. Now, hang on, I just need some help in changing. Sorry, Mary, can you just... Oh, sorry. I'm going to leave it going. Terrific. Okay, thank you so much for coming out. This is my first face-to-face talk in I don't know how long, so it's really, really nice not to be talking on a Zoom screen and to be saying hello, so thank you for coming along. I too would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet. I understand here it's the Guringai people of the Guringai Nation, and I don't think we understand how important it is, this acknowledgement, and how important their custodianship and their ways of being, knowing and doing in this world are, and I think it's really time we found out. So before we start, what I'd really like you to do is maybe just shut your eyes a little bit and think of a place that's really special to you. And just think about, just take a few deep breaths and think about where that might be and what you're feeling underfoot, what you're feeling on your skin, what you're smelling, what you're hearing, and how you're feeling in this beautiful place. And I think that that's sort of a really important place for us to start, is just in really feeling into the very special places that we are so gifted to have in Australia. And now I'd just like you also to think of the special little people in your lives, whether they're your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, nephews, or just other friends' children. But just think about these gorgeous little people and and how we are able to care for them and how important that is. So who am I? I was born in Jalmani on the Clarence River in the Gambangia Nation, on the banks of the mighty Clarence River, and I was raised in Mosman, which is Cubba, which is the land of the Guringai Eora Nation, and now I'm partly living in Millers Point, which is Kudyat, which is the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and also in Jungo, which means thinly wooded hills, on the Williams River, which is the land of the Warramai Nation. I think all of the interesting when we listen to Aboriginal names is they mean something and they tell you about the place, and I think that that's another learning and another thing we can all do to learn more about the places that we are in, and it's a big journey that I'm only just starting on. As Mary mentioned, I have been very much shaped by the waterways of the places that I have been fortunate to grow and live in, and that's where I get my regeneration and restoration all the time. So who am I? I'm a human being, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a sister, I'm an auntie, cousin, niece, architect, activist, and learning to be a regenerator. I have a very large family on both my mother's and father's side, and lots of relatives. I'm one of 6 kids, so I've got 4 sisters and a brother. And I am an architect, and I have been an architect since I graduated in 1987 from Sydney Uni, and I don't know how I lucked upon a career that has given me such joy right at the beginning, but I somehow did. So we're going to go on a journey. My husband told me it was too dense, but that's me, and we're going on this journey, so I hope you'll stay with me. I don't know how much more warning we need that the world systems that we're living in are upset and very fragile. 2019 to 2021 saw unbelievable drought, bushfire, bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef, fish kills, dust storms, snowstorms, drought, floods. Then we had COVID-19, several COVID-19, Delta, Omicron. We had the Black Lives Matter, I Can't Breathe social issues. We finally confronted the appalling treatment of women in Parliament House. Then we had some more floods, and then we had mice plagues. And that was just for those 2 years. Around the world, they've had even bigger and more impactful things. I don't think we hear about them often. But permafrosts are melting. There has been unbelievable rains. There have been raging snowstorms, raging fires. There were fires in America, in Colorado, followed by snowfall the next day just before Christmas. Tornadoes, all sorts of things. The world is kind of in distress, and I'm not sure, as I said, I'm not sure how much more we need to be really aware of that. You know, we've been told that we're trying to keep to 1.5 degrees, somewhere between 1.5 and 2 degrees increase in temperature since much earlier, and these are the difference, and there's a huge difference between 1.5 and 2, and at COP26 it was very much about keeping 1.5 alive, which some people thought was a great three-word thing, but others thought it was a bit trite. But it is really important, and the difference is very much about how much and where humans can inhabit the world. This is this is The Economist, you know, that left-wing magazine, that's talking about what we actually have to do to try and get to 1.5, to have a 67% chance of 1.5 degrees. And 1.5 degrees might enable us to be able to continue the human experiment to continue. So it's kind of a big job. It's a really big job. But the other bigger problem is that there are these major tipping points. So a major tipping point, so if some of these are hit, there's no return. And that's when it gets really scary, because then they're self-repeating. And the 1 to 3 degrees sort of show you what's happening. I think there's been a lot of talk recently, well, the coral reefs in Australia, but the West Antarctic ice sheet is moving a lot faster than other people have thought. The Greenland one as well. The Arctic summer ice sheet is kind of all but disappeared. So this is the really scary one, because once the tipping points go, then no one quite knows what to do. So what happens now? It's anyone's guess. And I do believe that COVID is a sign of climate change, because I think it has come from disrupted ecosystems where viruses skip into places where they haven't been before, and that's kind of how it all started. So who knows where we're going? But it's really serious. And this year I changed my practice at the beginning of 2018 to try and accelerate my ability to act on this. And just after last year and after going to COP26, I am really dedicated this year. And, you know, I'm upset, and I want you to be upset, and I want you to act, though. That's the point. We need to act. So Albert Einstein did know a few things, and I think two of his quotes really ring true at the moment, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. It won't happen. And the other one is we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So we need a different way of approaching the future. We need to do it quickly. I think that you know, there is no such thing as a single issue struggle, because we do not live in single issue lives. We live in systems. We live in deeply connected systems, and we need a systems way of thinking to deal with this, not this mechanical linear approach that has dominated our thinking for the last 200, 300 years. We don't want to go back to normal. We actually want to go forward into something that's much better. And I think Regenesis, who is a group that's is a world leader in regenerative thinking and design and development, says the present moment offers us the potential, born of crisis, to transform the way humans inhabit the earth. And that's kind of, I see, is a really optimistic possibility. So, at this crucial time, how did Glasgow go? Well, there was, for every person who lived in Glasgow, although a lot of people in Glasgow got out because they were renting out their apartments at obscene rates and Airbnb, but you could not be in Glasgow and not know about COP26 and not know the importance of of the people, the vulnerable people, the most vulnerable people who were being most impacted by inaction by the larger countries in the world. And it was all about teamwork, and all of these things were all over the railway lines, the roads, the buildings, the airports, and there was a really strong focus on saying, do something and don't get away with it. The newspapers were full of it, and full of what it could be, should be, shouldn't be. And right in the centre of one of the meeting places was this globe of the world to remind us that it is a global problem and we need to solve it right now. And there were a lot of people on the sidelines who were there demanding justice. There was a strike for Friday. On the Friday, there was a global march of over 100,000 people on the Saturday, right through the storming rain. There were also, that's on the right-hand side, that was the group of women I marched with. And then down here, I went to this amazing thing where about 20 people had walked to Glasgow from London via Edinburgh, listening to the land. And it's very much about approaching and embracing and honouring the Indigenous ways of being and knowing and doing and understanding this place we live in. So what were the key outcomes? I mean, I think we've all read about them. And some people, there are those who say totally inadequate. There are those who've been involved with it for a long time, saying it was unbelievable how much we achieved. Who knows? Somewhere in the middle of that is the truth. But it's not enough. I mean, it's not enough really. We've all got to do so much more, so much faster. And what was Australia's contribution? We nearly died when we got there and found this Moomba carbon capture and storage rig as the main demonstration in the Australian Pavilion. Here we were, Australia going to a climate change about reducing emissions, and Australia's biggest gas producer and CO2 emitter was there front and centre. It was distressing to say the least. They did move it out for most of the time, but Australia was shamed, and people like Mary Robinson and others were having harsh words with the minister saying this is not okay. Now these are words from a friend of mine, Nigel Howard. Nigel Howard is in his maybe late 60s. He's a grandfather and a father, and he is distraught beyond words about the current situation and what Australia isn't doing, or what it is doing. And so he has assiduously, and I can send you a bigger essay, but you know, not only do they try and get out of what we need to do, I mean, this is what we sort of, you know, that's saying, oh, we're only 1.5 emissions, but if you count the 3.6 from exports, we're actually closer to 5. The reduced emissions by 20% since 2005, which is mainly through the Australia Clause, which was about not cutting down forests. So it's not about doing something positive, it's about not doing something really negative. And then the Kyoto credits was also counted. So then what they were claiming as the joys were all things that were pretty dubious, and or they counted the carbon reduction from the Gillard government, which they repealed. I mean, and the uptake of rooftop solar, which they tried to stop happening. It's quite astounding. And then since then, Australia has become one of the biggest gas producers in the world, and gas is a fossil fuel, and it has huge issues with methane emissions, which are far, far worse than greenhouse gases. With after the Kurri Kurri gas plant, $600 million of Australian taxpayers that AEMO has said isn't necessary, maybe might operate 2% of the time, will employ 10 people. If you'd spent the same money on green jobs, it could have had 3,000 people employed doing something else. And there's 1 million jobs. Talk about BZE has got 1 million jobs planned from exactly these sorts of things. They've changed the definition of what clean energy is to include fossil fuels. The federal minister was taken to court and lost that case that she hadn't taken children's into consideration, and then she went and approved that mine and another 2 mines. I don't know if you know how much Australia gives in tax deductions to fossil fuel corporations, $10.3 billion in 2020 and 2021. Each of us have given these international corporations who pay virtually no tax in Australia $390 each, including your children. It's disgusting. In New South Wales, so we thought Matt Keen's doing a great job, he is, but 23 new coal projects have been approved. In Queensland, 8 new projects incorporating 20 mines, and some of them are mega projects bigger than Adani. So, and we've just overtaken Qatar as the bigger exporter of LNG. So, it is just beyond. And then up in the fracking up in the northern part of in Queensland, or northern part of New South Wales at Narrabri, 23,000 public comments, 98% of them said no, and the independent panel approved it. It is just beyond. I mean, I don't know what you do, but we have to get angry. We have to, and then Western Australia is doing a whole lot of major offshore. I mean, it's like you go to COP, totally ignore it, and you ignore the science around the world that is indisputable, and then you go and do all of this. In Australia, that's us becoming the pariahs of the world. So my key takeaways from COP was we can't wait or trust the federal government. We've got to get off and do our own things. First Nations wisdom is absolute, and ways of being and understanding and caring for country are key to shaping what we need to do. And to help with this, I mean, regenerative design is probably just a white man's way of designing the country, but it's really important. And every single tonne of carbon counts. So if we can cut carbon now, let's do it. Not wait till later, because it's only going to have to come out of the air, because there is a budget that will push us over 1.5 degrees, which makes the planet virtually uninhabitable for everyone. So, and net zero emissions buildings, 40% of our emissions come from building, from the embodied energy, and from operating our buildings. And if we can make them net zero, then we've just suddenly taken a huge cut out, and everything else we can think of. So I just want you to remember to go back to that place of natural beauty that you love and care for, and to think about those young people that you love and care for, and just think about them in light of what I've just told you. And then think, what are we, who are some of the most able and competent people in the world to do things, what are we going to do? Because we need to act, and how to make sure that we have a survivable future. And as Mary, and that might feel overwhelming, but I think we go to St. Mary MacKillop, who said, we can't do everything, but we can't do nothing. We can do something. So now I'm going to talk about a few things, because the future of the world is in our hands. We can either continue business as usual and get what's on the left-hand side, or do things differently and create a much more flourishing and restorative and regenerative world. And that's kind of where I want to go. Part of regenerative thinking is understanding that we exist in nested systems. So, for example, a nested system is you, your home, and then our home, because they are connected and you can't think of them separately or individually. And I just think that we need to, for us to change the world, we need to start small with ourselves and simultaneously work on those other systems, because they're not useless, they're not pointless, they're really important, and they are empowering. So what have I been doing for the last couple of years since I supposedly, people come and go, oh, you're tired, what are you doing in your spare time? Let me tell you. So first of all, these two guys, Steve Tompkins and Michael Paulman from the UK, after hearing the 2018 IPCC report, where they said danger, danger, and they realised that as architects, these are architects in the UK, we're not doing enough. Sustainable architecture isn't cutting it, it's not okay. What do we do? They reread Danella Meadows, who's a systems thinker, and looking at how do you make change in complex systems? And the most important thing for making change is mindsets. It's not all the rest of the stuff, it's your mindset. And so they said, okay, let's start Architects Declare. And they started UK Architects Declare, and Rand Boydell, who is in the room, he's an Australian architect living in England, and he then sort of helped us start Australian Architects Declare in Australia from there. And as of yesterday, the UK, and these are practices who've signed up, so over 1,200, and we were nearly beating the UK, but they've taken over us. And what is Australian Architects Declare? Here we created this vision that it is to empower architects to take responsibility and act in a way that we can realise our potential as a community of action, so that we can be catalysts for a regeneration of our own ecosystems. And I think that's a description, a vision for all of us. It's not just for architects. I think we've just got to say we're not going to be a problem anymore. We're going to be the solution. We're going to be the creative, fabulous solution we need. Another little group, so this is Nigel Howard, who's my very distressed friend, who's grandfather and father. And he is just livid that at the moment the Australian Building Codes Board is considering a change, finally after 13 years, is finally thinking of making it slightly more, making the building code slightly more demanding in its energy efficiency, and they've taken net zero emissions off the table, and it should be. So with just about 2%, if you go from, at the moment it's 6 stars, if you go to 7 stars, which is a possibility, but the HIA and the MBA are lobbying against that. Shame on them, absolute shame on them. They should be at least 7 star, and it's been proven that it is immediately cost effective, because if you just put 2%, spend 2% more and put some solar panels on your roof, the reduction in your energy bills will more than pay for that extra money, and you're immediately better. Plus, this year alone, or last year, 144,000 homes were built. So if the difference is a change in sort of from, say, 7 tonnes down to 5 tonnes to no tonnes, we can 720,000 tonnes of CO2 emissions can be cut out by just making homes zero emissions, which will make them much more comfortable and much better to live in as well. So it's got huge social benefits. It's one of the cheapest ways of reducing emissions, and one of the most, and it's like, why wouldn't you do that? Because all of those buildings are going to be there for quite some time. So I think there's a website there, and we want people to lobby the state minister to say, do it, because they haven't decided yet. And the more people who are not even architects, there are a few in the room, please lobby, and other people, write to the state minister and say, this is a really good initiative, please do it. Another initiative that I'm involved with is the Climate Action Sustainability Task Force for the Australian Institute of Architects. And we developed this CCAP, which is a Coordinated Climate Action Plan, which is about decarbonising the construction industry by 2030. Can it be done? Well, let's give it a try. The other thing that we're doing is developing a framework for design excellence that will include intrinsic within it designing with country and sustainability or regenerative design, so that you cannot consider a building has design excellence unless it addresses those with gusto. And apart from that, the AACA Architecture Accreditation Council of Australia produced a new national standard of competency for architects, and they have done that. So we actually have to do that, and we have to change the way we teach students so that they will come out understanding that and being confident in that. So all of this has given me, I've also been thinking about, well, what do we do? What does this mean? How do we do this? What is this mindset that we need to be changing? How can we be thinking differently about this? There's this fantastic book called Cassandra Speaks by Elizabeth Lesser. When women are the storytellers, the human story changes. Guess what? So they briefly talk about how this idea that when we are faced with a threat, our reaction is fight or flight. In about 1995, they worked out that all the surveys that had delivered that result had all been done with men. No women were consulted. And when they actually spoke to women, they found that their reaction in a terrifying situation was closer to tend and befriend. And often that was because they needed to build up stronger relationships, because they were caring for often people like babies or older people who couldn't fight and couldn't flee. And I think this idea of tend and befriend is it's like what we should be doing at the moment, rather than spending $3.15 billion on tanks and I don't know how many $1 billion on submarines. Why don't we tend and befriend? Into renewed existence, generate again. There's a whole lot of words, and I was talking with someone just before I came here. It's a word that often is misunderstood. So I'd like to just talk a bit more about it. So this is a beautiful diagram from Daniel Christian Wall, who took it from the Regenesis crew. And this kind of looks at the line across the middle is really where we're sustaining what is. And below that, anything below that, which is sustainable, which is green, which is conventional practice, is really degenerating the world that we're in. That's a fact. Above that, where we can restore, reconcile and regenerate, is where we need to move to. And it's about living systems and design, guides design and innovation. It's about collaboration, creating abundance. It's about creating conditions conducive to life. It's about understanding the potential of the systems that we're working in and enabling them to be realised. And it means being open to changing what we're doing as we understand what really needs to be done for the particular sites and the particular projects and anything that we do. I think this is one of the best definitions I've heard about what regenerative approach to life is. If you give someone a fish, they'll eat for a day. If you teach them to fish, they and their families will probably eat for a year or forever. But if you teach them to love the ocean, together with the ocean, they'll both thrive forever. And that's what regeneration is really about. It's about where everyone in that system, you work out the synergies and you all thrive. It's not just about one part of the system. Like in the middle one, the fisherman or fisher person will thrive, but the fish might not. They might fish in the wrong places or deplete the fish stocks. But if they love the ocean, they'll actually know how to keep the fish safe. They might not even eat the fish. They might try and eat kelp. Who knows? But they'll, but it's about falling in love with the place and understanding it and caring for it and wanting to make it good. So in Australia, we've got Designing with Country. We've had it for probably over 60,000, maybe 80,000, maybe more years. And at the moment, the Government Architect's Office has developed a whole paper on designing for country, and it's being embedded in the New South Wales planning rules, thank God. And it's now embedded in the competency standards for architects, and will be embedded in our design excellence framework. And what a great gift from our First Nations people to have those ways of working. And it, to be fair, people go, well, what does it mean? We need to find out. And part of the future is we don't know everything, but it shouldn't stop us from going there. We've got to walk into the future and work it out as we go. I've been part of this little group that put together Regenerative. It was going to be, what we were going to call it, something else, but we went, it's Australia. Let's call it Regenerative Songlines Australia. It's going to be Regenerative Pathways for Australia. And this is a website containing where people with really great projects and ideas can put it so we can all be inspired and share those. It's Indigenous-led and it's kind of really exciting. And I have also just trained to do Waiapa work. Waiapa meaning connect to country, and earth work meaning the earth. So it's a earth, mind, body, spirit, well-being modality, and it's about and so I decided to train because I think that as architects, maybe we need to be thinking this way as well. Like, how do we think through, prioritise the 14 elements of the earth as we think about architecture? Doing a lot of reading. This book I'm just listening to, and we've bought the hard copy, but it's The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity. And in it, the authors plot in detail how the myth of progress inherited in the West emerged as a defensive, Eurocentric response to Indigenous critiques. The biggest thing is there's a whole lot of other stories that the world has lived by that isn't this current one. And we can, as this one has only really been apparent for the last 250 years, we can create another story, a more inclusive and more generous and caring story to go forward, and we need to be all part of creating that. And Michael Corwin, again on the right-hand side, has, with his friend Sarah Ishioka, just written this book, Flourish, or just launched this book, Flourish, which is talking about how this can apply to architecture, to design, to all of this. And I'm just starting, and it's beautiful, it's inspiring, and it's great, and it's creating this joyous picture of what we can be. But it's different, and we need to step into that difference, and we need to bring people along with us. So this year, I'm going to be working much more closely with 1 Million Women, because we want to we've got a number of things on our agenda. The mission of 1 Million Women is to empower women across the world to to make good decisions every day and break down climate change through those small decisions. We've been going since 2009 and we are over 1 million people who subscribe to us. We want to grow that, but we're going to grow that this year we're going to concentrate on helping people understand the importance of their vote, and that climate change should be absolutely foremost in your choice of who you vote for. Understanding climate change and being able to act on it, not say yes, 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 and then vote differently. It is really crucial at all elections across the world. We want to help our followers move our money. There's this fantastic, you can get this on Netflix, called Our Planet, Too Big to Fail. It's been produced by movie makers in the UK, funded by the WWF, but it's all of the big, from World Bank, from all the big banks around the world, are saying you've got to move your money. You've got to tell the banks and the superannuation funds you're moving it from why you are, because it's not just about not supporting fossil fuel and the environmental degrading activities. It's about putting it into supporting the industries of the future. And if you do that, it's 21 times more effective than supposedly, and I don't know where this, anyway, it's a number they use, 21 times more effective than going vegetarian, stopping flying and changing to solar power in your house. It's powerful. And then I want to sort of concentrate on an idea about regenerate your home. So regenerate you, your home and our home. And that's about sort of helping people understand how they can be powerful agents and find much more joyous and wonderful ways of being in the world through looking sort of through the lens of themselves and their home and the impact that will have on a wider one. So watch this space. So, people say small steps, do they count? I love this one. Actually, small steps help you get up higher. Big steps can often be too hard to do. And there's just a whole lot of little things that are really good and joyous, and we should be doing them, and we can do them. And they, people go, oh, but I don't want to, it's like, do you realise, we are on the verge, on a tipping point of us not being able to continue, or the people, it's even in our generation, continuing to live in this world. It's that serious, and it's not me being hysterical, just the same. So, if not us, who? And if not now, when? And we are the people we've been waiting for and no one else is coming. So it's kind of up to us, and we are capable and able. So, thank you.
You want the microphone? Hi, Carla, how are you?
Hi, Louise.
I'll take this. Where are the most effective places to look for implementing this as an architecture in our practice?
Well, look, to me, the places that I've found the most inspiration to date have been the Living Building Challenge. There's a whole bunch of case studies. That's an international one, and most of the case studies are overseas, but they are really inspiring. I think that this Flourish book is full of examples. It's just, it is amazing, and I think if I don't know how long it will take to get it from overseas, but I think there's also an online e-version of the book, but I'm not sure if they've got the photos on that e-version. But I think that it's, what we've got to do is just understand our agency and ability to do this, and really get firmly in our mind that whatever we do, the environment needs to benefit from it as much as our clients and as much as we do. And so reshape our thinking and our questions about, is this good for everyone? And just because we are, I think being an architect is a great thing because we are creative people. And we just need to apply that creative thinking to a different sort of set of parameters. I was speaking to someone today who shall remain nameless, but he rang up to ask me to talk about a particular, to chair a panel of discussion around circular economy and focusing on materials, and because they're just about to knock down a building and build a new building. And I said, well, why don't you stop knocking down the building? It's that sort of thinking. And he goes, oh, we can't do that, we're about to let contracts. But we've got to kind of go, well, maybe we can. What does it take? I think we've got to stop saying, no, I can't do that. And just try and find out, because every single ton of carbon counts. And I just think that we need to be really questioning and helping, creating that tend thing is creating a community of people around you. So on your projects, building that community of the client and the builders and the other consultants to say, we can do this. What a great opportunity. How can we do this and work together on it? I mean, I've been doing this on a project up in Taree. We've been working on it for way too long because of lack of funding. But that has been, all the people working on that project in that integrated way of really trying to address the living building challenge have just found it to be the most rewarding project they're on. And it's because they're all helping each other. And no one knows quite what to do, but we're finding opportunities. So this is in Taree, and the builder who's been really interested in what do we do with construction waste is now working with the council. The council has set up a sustainability committee and has opened it to all the people on the thing, and they're looking more widely and what else can we do, and so it kind of, there's ripple effects just because you start to think differently and you operate differently and you build teams who can do that differently.
Yeah. So basically it's just trying.
Yeah, and you might fall on the way, but you pick yourself up and you go, well, because often what doesn't work is your biggest lesson. But if you're in the right way, if it doesn't work perfectly, perfect doesn't have to be perfect, but it's got to be better, and then maybe the next project will be even better.
Yeah.
But just don't be afraid, and don't be afraid to go into your client and say, hey, let's talk about this. Do we really need that whatever? Or how can we approach this in a different way?
Yeah. I mean, it happens all the small ones, like someone wants to put in a door and say, well, I don't just really an existing door. Well, what the new door looks like, we'll make it look like the old one. Why don't you just keep the old one off and it's got a little mix in it? But that's what makes it beautiful.
Kintsugi,
It's the most beautiful door.
Yeah.
It's really too late. It's not a new door, it's just cardboard. So just keep the old one off, it's not real.
Yeah.
And so that's it.
And every conversation like that builds.
Yeah. Thank you.
Peter.
All right, you mentioned that you gave some examples of how the construction and development industry is starting to think a little bit differently. I mean, how serious do you think that trend is? I mean, those of us who have worked in that industry know the importance of the bottom line, and that that's what really drives what gets done and what gets done.
Well, I think the bottom line is going to change very quickly, very seriously, very soon. Michael, Paul and Sarah did a book launch for their book last night at midnight, and I watched it this morning because I wasn't up at midnight last night. But and he recalls going to see someone in Berlin, a friend of his, and it was the month before the wall came down. And her father just said, that wall isn't going to come down in my lifetime, it's not going to happen. And a month later it came down. And then she went back a number of years later and he said, well, it was always going to come down. And it's just interesting how your mindset, and some people are better at seeing the cracks and the fissures, because often they're not what the government's presenting or what the main media is presenting, but there's lots happening elsewhere. And I think that is happening right now. I think it's happening in the built environment industry around the world. Michael asked me to be part of a group. There was before COP, there was a UK symposium about built environment. I'll try and find the references for it. But we reviewed projects from all around the world to be exhibited in this thing before COP. And there is some seriously great stuff happening around the world. And it's like, they're the leaders, and what is it? I think it's 3%, it takes 3% to make a movement. And there's at least 3% of really seriously interesting things happening. And I just think that there's going to be people who are just going to be caught in the backdraft. If I just get going and just tell your client, if you want stranded assets, if you want to be have your reputation damaged, then just keep doing what you're doing. If you want to be part of the future change, and come with us and let's do it together. Again, it's about building that enthusiasm and interest and teams, and it's a whole lot better place to be. And is what I don't know. I think we've got to think, what is the bottom line? What is the bottom line is human beings being able to keep living. I think that's a pretty important bottom line to me. Yeah.
Well, just a practical question. So I saw the little pamphlet which is about the local development plan. So, what role does that and a group like this have in trying to change the direction of these sorts of planning things and so on? Is it at the core of so much of what we do build because this is what we're told to do?
I think this group wrote it.
Yeah, they probably community wrote the clauses in the current development control plan back in the early 80s. They engaged a consultant, provided it themselves, and then council adopted it. But I'm pretty sure there's a chance to review it, which is fine, and maybe
and that's the thing.
It
could be a really fun thing to have a workshop with people going, okay, what would a flourishing plan look like, and see what it's about.
The problem is that it's not a bad plan thing now, but unfortunately the consent authorities don't adhere to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Caroline. I'm just wondering if I could pick your brain. One of the things I kind of feel like is that we are all consumers in this society. And have you come across any literature or about how much is enough? Because I kind of feel like no matter how green you are, if you don't accept a much lower baseline that people are living, then you're still a mass consumer of a lot of material. Is there a world that you know of that starts to look at that?
Yeah, look, I've been doing a lot of reading lately over the last years. And all the language you just used is part of the problem, because it's not that we're looking for less. I think what everyone in the world wants is a meaningful and happy life. And I don't think we get that much meaning and happiness from consuming everything. Sure, there's base level of, there's sort of certain things you might, having a roof over your head and having a comfortable bed or whatever is kind of important. But there's some beautiful books. There's one called The Art of Joyful Hedonism, or The Joyful Art of Hedonism, which is the most glorious little book about how you can find great joy in this world without consuming anything. And it's hedonism, as in, joy, and I'll have to, but it's about not doing much, but finding that joy from experiences that don't require you consuming things. And I think that that's what we've all got to kind of work out, is how do we, Christmas, like all that crap. Like, I just go to the shops and think, oh my God, this is all landfill that's going to happen. Why do we need to do that? Who gets the joy from that? Whereas sort of giving, we're trying to give experiences of going somewhere with someone as a gift, which is not a thing that will get thrown away, but just and it enriches the experience between you and the person who you've given it to. So there's a lot of stuff around that, and Michael and Sarah talk about radical sufficiency as a thing we've all got to work out. What is sufficient? Because sufficient is different to and we've got to stop the language on. We've got to cut back. We've got to do less. Have less. We've got to have this. We've got to have sufficient, and we've got to find the ways of doing that where there is joy and there is delight, but there's also caring for the world. They're not mutually exclusive, and I think that's part of the mindset we've got to change. It's not either or. It's sort of and both of a different way of approaching it. And yes, the whole economy's got to change. Yes. And how does that happen? I don't know, but I just know that has to happen. Because if we keep going this way, if this sort of neo-capitalistic approach where, in the GDP, the forest is worth nothing until it gets cut down. And how can you say a forest is worth nothing? Like, we've got to change that. And we can. This whole way of being has only been happening for the last 250, 300 years. So it's not like it can't be different. It was different. It can be different again. And it's not about going back to the cave, as people say. It's just taking on board what's important.
Interestingly, the current subcommittees of the Progress Association are events, which are very important to our community and to connecting with the world outside our community. Safety, which is also very important, and of course we live in a very area that's very susceptible to fire. And the Hall Committee, which is also this fall is like the heart and soul of our community. So there's no reason why we can't all exist together. So, but that balance about bushfire issues and environment and the value of trees is a very difficult one for our community. So it is something that, yeah, we shouldn't be afraid to talk through it together rather than avoid each other and be at odds.
I heard something the other day, if you take the I out of illness and replace it with we, you get wellness. And I think that transfer from I to we is really important. Yes?
On your slides was very dense with papers. Is there a way to get access to those so that we can look back at it and actually take notes?
I wasn't sure about just making that available because but let me think about that. But I think it's being recorded.
Yeah, so they make available the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Or just even a synopsis of it.
Really?
You know, just in terms of people to look up, to read about.
Yeah. Okay, let me think.
We can turn it into a practice.
Okay. Okay, I'll do that. I can do that. Yes.
Back in the early 2000s, we had a situation where we had something brought along called private certifiers.
Yeah.
And they seem to have been one of the biggest problems in the integrity, the overall and integrated integrity of architecture, development, and everything else. Do you believe that it's probably time that we looked at that situation and looked at some way of remedying the way that they can ignore things that are important?
My husband is one of the greatest. Anyway, he hates private certifiers.
So do I.
And we have this conversation a lot of the time. And yes, something needs to be done. But I think that's not. I'm not focusing on that at the moment. I'm focusing on this, and I'm thinking that there's got to be other people in the room who can take that on, because there's no point in saying you're going to do something and then it's not done properly and no one cares. And all of those, if you had proper certification, all of those problems with those apartments wouldn't have happened, or many of them wouldn't have happened. But yes, I agree. You can't have rules and then not.
Well, I think they're a symptom. They're not the disease. They're a symptom of a system which dumbs down quality, design, and attention to detail and the environment. It's that bottom line again.
Do you want to say anything, John?
No, I agree that Peter's right. It's a product of a system which has grown over many years, which almost deifies the developer. The developer has become, in our society, the person that represents success and someone who has to be supported. Now, that's possibly true, but the way we've deified that and let the controls which government normally provides, let those controls fall apart and fall away. It's been very deliberate, by the way. It's not something that's just happened.
It's been a strategy for quicker, simpler development.
So it does come back again to the politicians and the leaders that we have. Ultimately, if we want to change things in the area that both Peter and I and Caroline are in, it's a matter of convincing the politicians, and that sometimes means going to the ballot box and changing them, I think. Which is where this whole movement of independence has come from, and that's going to be an interesting impact on the next election.
Can I just say I had one? I mean, I'm not losing it, so I'm very interested. Start it off.
Hi.
Yeah, so this is awesome. Now, I'm not a big fan of the local provider. But I want to learn a lot.
It may be time to have a drink.
Yeah.